She didn't know this would be the last night she would see her children alive. Maya Allen Lawson had survived many things in her marriage. She had survived humiliation. She had survived loneliness. She had survived being called worthless by the woman who was supposed to be family. But nothing could have prepared her for this night. Maya's story didn't begin with tragedy. It started with a promise. Before we heat things up and take you back 7 years, it would mean the world to me if you hit the subscribe button. Back to the story. 7 years ago, Maya met Kent at a community event in her home country. He was charming, well-spoken, and from a family that seemed to have it all. He promised her a better life, a life full of love, a life full of opportunity, a life in America. She believed him. Against the warnings of her own mother, against the quiet doubts in her heart, she said yes when he proposed. She thought love would be enough. She thought marriage would protect her. She was wrong. The problem started the moment Maya met Kent's mother, Diane Lawson, a woman with cold eyes and a sharp tongue, a woman who smiled in public and sneered in private, a woman who made it clear from day one that Maya was not good enough for her son. "You're from where again?" Diane had asked at their first dinner, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm from Africa," Maya replied politely, trying to smile. Diane's lips curled. "How interesting." Kent said nothing. That should have been Maya's first warning, but she was young, she was in love, and she believed that time would change things. It didn't. After the wedding, Maya moved into Kent's family home temporarily while they saved money. It was supposed to be just a few months. It turned into 2 years. 2 years of being watched, criticized, controlled. Diane controlled everything. The kitchen, the groceries, the schedule, even how Maya dressed. "You're representing this family now," Diane would say, looking her up and down. "Try to look presentable." Maya bit her tongue. She cooked. She cleaned. She tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law. And Kent? He was always working, always tired, always somewhere else. When Maya tried to talk to him about his mother's treatment, he would sigh and say, "She's just set in her ways. Don't take it personally." But it was personal. It was always personal. When Maya became pregnant with their first child, she thought things might change. She thought a grandchild would soften Diane's heart. It didn't. "You're going to ruin your body," Diane said when Maya told her the news. "And then what? You think my son will stay interested?" Maya said nothing. She had learned by then that silence was safer. Her daughter, Amara, was born on a rainy spring morning. She had her father's eyes and her mother's smile. Maya fell in love the moment she held her, but Diane barely looked at the baby. "She's so dark," Diane muttered. "Takes after your side." Maya's heart broke a little more that day. Despite everything, Maya kept going. She had to. She has a daughter now. A reason to survive. When Amara turned 2, Maya became pregnant again. This time with a son. His name was Caleb. Caleb was smaller, quieter. He cried often. Maya held him close every night, whispering promises that things would get better. But they didn't. By the time Caleb was 1 year old, Maya was drowning. Drowning in exhaustion, drowning in emotional abuse, drowning in a marriage that felt more like a prison. Kent had been promoted at work. He travelled more. He was home less. And when he was home, he was distant. Diane, on the other hand, was always there, always watching, always judging. "You're spoiling those children," she would say, "picking them up every time they cry. That's why they're so needy." Maya ignored her. She held her babies close and told herself that one day she would find a way out. But she ran out of time. It started with a fever. Maya woke up that evening feeling like her body was on fire. Her head pounded. Her throat burned. She could barely stand. Kent was on the night shift where he worked as an administrator. He wouldn't be home until morning. Diane was in the living room, watching television. Maya stumbled out of her bedroom, holding onto the wall for support. Amara and Caleb were playing in the hallway. Amara looked up at her with wide, worried eyes. "Mom, are you okay?" Maya tried to smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just a little tired." But she wasn't fine. Her vision blurred. Her legs buckled. She collapsed. When Maya woke up, she was in a hospital bed. The lights were too bright. The room was spinning. A nurse leaned over her. "You're awake. Good. You had a severe infection. We've started you on antibiotics." Maya's first thought was her children. "My kids." "Your mother-in-law said she's watching them," the nurse said gently. "Try to rest." But Maya couldn't rest. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The fever had drained her completely. Hours passed. The sun set. The hospital grew quiet. And then, finally, Kent arrived. "Maya?" His voice was flat. His face was pale. Where are the kids?" Maya asked immediately, her heart racing. Kent didn't answer right away. He looked at the floor. "Kent, where are Amara and Caleb?" They're at home, with my mother." "I need to go home," Maya said, panic rising in her chest. "I need to see them." Kent hesitated. "The doctor said you should stay overnight." "I don't care what the doctor said." Maya's voice cracked. "Take me home, now." The drive back to the house was silent. Kent gripped the steering wheel tightly. His jaw was clenched. Maya stared out the window, her stomach twisting with dread. Something was wrong. She could feel it. When they pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Too dark. Maya rushed out of the car, ignoring the dizziness, ignoring the weakness in her legs. She burst through the front door. "Amara! Caleb!" Silence. Diane was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, face blank. "Where are my children?" Maya demanded, her voice shaking. Diane didn't even look at her. "In their room." Maya ran down the hallway. The door to the children's room was closed, locked. Her blood turned to ice. "Kent!" she screamed. "The door is locked!" Kent appeared behind her, fumbling with a key. His hands were shaking. The door swung open, and Maya's world shattered. Amara was lying on the floor, her little body still. Her lips were pale. Her skin is cold. Caleb was beside her, curled up as if he had fallen asleep. But they weren't asleep. Maya dropped to her knees, pulling Amara into her arms. "No, no, no, no." She shook her gently. "Amara, baby, wake up, wake up." Nothing. Kent stood frozen in the doorway, his face white. Maya turned to Caleb, her hands trembling as she touched his face. "Caleb, Caleb, please." But there was no response. Maya screamed, a raw, guttural scream that tore through the house. "Call 911, she sobbed. "Call them now." Kent finally moved, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. Maya held her children close, rocking back and forth, begging them to wake up. But they didn't. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They worked quickly, efficiently. But Maya could see it in their eyes. It was too late. The police came next. 2 officers, a man and a woman. They asked questions, took notes, looked around the room. Maya couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She sat on the floor, staring at nothing. And then Diane spoke. "She left them alone," Diane said, her voice calm. "Cold. She went to the hospital and left them with no one." Maya's head snapped up. "What?" "You abandoned them," Diane continued, looking directly at the officers. "I told her I couldn't watch them. I'm too old, but she left anyway." "That's a lie!" Maya's voice cracked. "You said you'd watch them. You locked them in that room. Diane's expression didn't change. I did no such thing. Kent stood in the corner, silent. Kent, Maya pleaded, turning to him. Tell them. Tell them what she did. But Kent didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. Kent, Maya's voice broke. Say something. The female officer stepped forward. Mom, we're going to need you to come with us. Maya's heart stopped. What? We need to take your statement. There's going to be an investigation. I didn't do anything, Maya sobbed. She locked them in. The male officer placed a hand on her shoulder. Mom, please come with us. Maya looked at Kent one last time, her eyes pleading, but he turned away. And that's when she knew. She was alone. The officer turned to her, his voice low and steady. Ma'am, we need to take your statement. Your husband says you're responsible. Maya's world went black. The hours after the police took Maya's statement felt like drowning in slow motion. She sat in a cold interrogation room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and answered the same questions over and over again. Where were you when the children were locked in the room? At the hospital, Maya answered. Who was supposed to be watching them? My mother-in-law, Maya replied with what the nurse told her. The nurse told me my mother-in-law said she would watch them. But your husband claims you left without arranging proper care. Maya's throat tightened. That's not true. I collapsed. I didn't have a choice. The detective, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, jotted down notes without looking at her. Your mother-in-law says she told you she couldn't watch them, that she's too frail. She's lying, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. She locked them in that room. She ignored them. The detective said nothing, and that silence told Maya everything she needed to know. They didn't believe her. By the time Maya left the police station, the sun was rising. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. She felt like a ghost. Kent was waiting in the car outside. He didn't get out, didn't open her door, just sat there, staring straight ahead. Maya climbed into the passenger seat, her hands trembling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya turned to him, her voice raw. Why didn't you tell them the truth? Kent's jaw tightened. I did. You lied. Her voice cracked. You told them I left the kids with no one. You know that's not true. Kent finally looked at her. His eyes were hollow, empty. My mother said she told you she couldn't watch them. And you believe her? Maya's voice rose. Over me? Your wife? Kent looked away. She's my mother, Maya. Those 5 words shattered what was left of Maya's heart. She stared at him, her chest heaving. Your mother killed our children. Kent flinched, but he didn't argue. He didn't defend her. He just started the car. And Maya realized with crushing clarity that she had already lost him. The next morning, when they arrived back at the house, Diane was still there, sitting in the living room, calm, composed, as if nothing had happened. Maya walked past her without a word and went straight to the nursery. Her newborn daughter, Zara, was still asleep in her crib. She was only 3 months old, too small to understand what had happened, too innocent to know her siblings were gone. Maya picked her up gently, cradling her close. Zara stirred, her tiny hand curling around Maya's finger. I won't let them take you, Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. I promise. But even as she said it, she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. 2 days later, there was a knock on the door. Maya opened it to find 2 social workers standing on the porch. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a younger man holding a clipboard. Mrs. Lawson? The woman asked gently. Maya nodded, her stomach sinking. I'm Karen, and this is my colleague, David. We're from Child Protective Services. May we come in? Maya's hands went cold. Why? Karen's expression softened. We need to conduct a welfare check. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Cases like this. Maya stepped aside, her legs weak. They asked to see Zara. They asked about the house. They asked about Maya's mental state. And then Karen said the words Maya had been dreading. Mrs. Lawson, given the ongoing investigation and the circumstances surrounding the deaths of your other children, we're going to need to place Zara in temporary foster care. Maya's world tilted. No. It's just temporary, Karen said quickly. Until the investigation is complete. No. Maya's voice broke. You can't take her. She's all I have left. David stepped forward. We understand this is difficult, but you don't understand anything. Maya's voice cracked. I didn't do anything wrong. My mother-in-law. We're aware of the allegations, Karen said softly. But until the investigation is complete, we have to ensure Zara's safety. She's safe with me, Maya sobbed. I'm her mother. But it didn't matter. 20 minutes later, they took Zara from Maya's arms. Maya collapsed on the floor, screaming, as they carried her daughter out the door. Kent stood in the hallway watching, silent, and Diane sat on the couch, sipping tea. In the days that followed, Maya became a hollow shell. She barely ate, barely slept. She moved through the house like a ghost, haunted by the absence of her children. Amara's toys were still in the corner. Caleb's blanket was still on the couch. Zara's crib was empty. Kent avoided her. He worked late, slept in the guest room, spoke only when necessary. And Diane acted as if nothing had happened. You should eat something, Diane said one evening, her tone flat. You look terrible. Maya stared at her, rage and grief churning in her chest. You killed them, Maya whispered. Diane didn't even blink. Don't be dramatic. You locked them in that room. You left them to die. Diane set down her tea slowly, her eyes cold. You're the one who abandoned them by fainting. You're the one who failed as a mother. How can you say that? I was exhausted. You never helped. Kent never helped. I had to take care of 3 children on my own. Maya's hands trembled as she let out her pain. Blame me all you want. I will prove what you did. I will let the whole world know how cruel you are to your flesh and blood. Diane smiled. A small, cruel smile. Good luck. But those kids were never my flesh and blood. The police investigation dragged on. Days turned into weeks. Maya was interviewed 3 more times. Each time, the questions felt sharper, more accusatory. Why didn't you call someone else to watch the children? Why didn't you take them to the hospital with you? Why didn't you check on them sooner? Maya answered every question, her voice hoarse, her spirit breaking. But no one seemed to care about the truth. The media picked up the story. Local news outlets ran headlines. Mother under investigation after 2 children die in locked room. Tragic neglect or terrible accident. Maya's face was plastered across the internet. Strangers left comments calling her a monster, a murderer, a failure. She had no one to defend her, no family in the country, no friends who hadn't already distanced themselves. She was utterly, completely alone. 3 weeks into the investigation, Maya sat in a grey waiting room at the social services office. She had been summoned for another update on Zara's case. A woman approached her, mid-40s with dark hair pulled into a bun and warm brown eyes. She wore a lanyard that read, Community Liaison Officer, Lisa Grant. Mrs. Maya Lawson, Lisa said gently. Maya looked up, exhausted. Lisa sat down beside her. I've been following your case. I want you to know. I don't think you did this. Maya's eyes filled with tears. It was the first time anyone had said those words to her. "Thank you," Maya whispered. Lisa reached into her bag and pulled out a small business card. "You need a lawyer. A good one." Maya looked down at the card. It was simple, white, with a name and a phone number. Ethan Reyes, criminal defense attorney. "He takes impossible cases," Lisa said quietly. "Cases no one else will touch. If anyone can help you, it's him." Maya stared at the card, her hands shaking. "I don't have any money." "Call him anyway," Lisa said firmly. "Tell him Lisa Grant sent you. He'll listen." That night, Maya sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the business card. She had nothing left to lose. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. Deep, steady, professional. "Ethan Reyes." Maya's throat tightened. "My name is Maya Allen Lawson. Lisa Grant gave me your number. She said you might be able to help me." There was a pause. "What's your situation?" Ethan asked. Maya took a shaky breath. "I'm being investigated for the deaths of my 2 children, but I didn't do it. My mother-in-law locked them in a room while I was hospitalized. She's lying, my husband is lying, and no one believes me." Another pause, longer this time. "When can you come to my office?" Ethan asked. Maya's heart pounded. "Tomorrow? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll see you then." The line went dead. Maya sat in the darkness, clutching the phone to her chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The next day, Maya stood outside a modest office building in downtown. The sign on the door read, "Reyes and Associates, Criminal Defense." She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The reception area was small but clean. A young woman at the desk smiled at her. "You must be Mrs. Maya. Mr. Reyes is expecting you. Go right in." Maya walked down a short hallway and stopped in front of a door with a gold nameplate, Ethan Reyes. She knocked softly. "Come in," a voice called. Maya opened the door. Ethan Reyes stood behind his desk, tall and composed, dressed in a crisp suit. His dark hair was neatly combed, his eyes were sharp, intelligent, but the moment he saw her face, he went completely still. His eyes widened, his breath caught. For a long, suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's you." Maya stood frozen in the doorway of Ethan Reyes's office, confusion flickering across her exhausted face. The man behind the desk was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. His expression was a mixture of shock, recognition, and something else she couldn't quite place. Relief. "I'm sorry," Maya said hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do we know each other?" Ethan blinked, as if snapping himself out of a trance. He cleared his throat and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Maya hesitated, then stepped inside and lowered herself into the chair. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her body tense, her eyes red-rimmed from weeks of crying. Ethan sat down slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. "You don't remember me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Maya shook her head, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, I don't." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a faint, bittersweet smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't think you would." 7 years ago, Ethan Reyes was not the successful criminal defense attorney sitting in a polished office. He was a broke immigrant with nothing but a dream and a mountain of debt. He had come to the United States with his younger sister after their parents died. He worked 3 jobs while putting himself through community college, trying to save enough to apply to law school, but it was never enough. One evening, after a grueling double shift at a warehouse and a restaurant, Ethan collapsed on a bench outside a grocery store. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His rent was overdue. His sister needed medication he couldn't afford. He sat there, head in his hands, wondering if he should just give up. That's when he heard a voice. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Ethan looked up. A young woman stood in front of him, holding 2 bags of groceries. She had warm, concerned eyes and a gentle smile. "I'm fine," Ethan muttered, looking away, but she didn't leave. She set her bags down and sat beside him. "You don't look fine," she said softly. Ethan said nothing. "When's the last time you ate?" she asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking for charity." "I'm not offering charity," she said simply. "I'm offering a sandwich." She reached into one of her grocery bags and pulled out a sub-sandwich and a bottle of water. She held them out to him. Ethan stared at her, pride and desperation warring in his chest. "Please," she said gently. "Take it." He took it, and for the next 20 minutes they sat on that bench together. She didn't ask him invasive questions. She didn't pity him. She just sat with him. Before she left, she pulled a crumpled $20 bill from her purse and pressed it into his hand. "I don't need," Ethan started. "Yes, you do," she said firmly. "And one day, when you're in a position to help someone else, you will. That's how life works." She smiled at him one last time, picked up her bags, and walked away. Ethan never got her name, but he never forgot her face. That $20 bought him the application fee for law school, and 7 years later, he was here, a lawyer, because of her. Ethan's voice pulled Maya back to the present. "You helped me once," he said quietly. "A long time ago. You probably don't remember because you've helped a lot of people. That's the kind of person you are." Maya's eyes widened slightly. I don't understand." Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "You don't have to worry." Maya stared at him, her mind racing, trying to piece together a memory that felt like a lifetime ago. I don't," her voice faltered. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "You don't have to remember, but I do. And that's the reason why I have to help you. Not because of Lisa, but because I owe you." Maya's throat tightened. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan wasted no time. He spent the rest of that day going through every document, every police report, every piece of evidence related to Maya's case. And the more he read, the angrier he became. The police report was a disaster. Incomplete, biased, full of inconsistencies. And no one was bothered about it. Diane Lawson's statement claimed she was too frail to watch the children and had explicitly told Maya she couldn't help. But there was no evidence to support that claim, no witnesses, no documentation. Kent's statement corroborated his mother's story. He claimed Maya had left the children alone, knowing no one was available to watch them. But Ethan noticed something. Kent's statement had been amended twice. Why would someone change their story? Ethan muttered to himself, highlighting the discrepancies. He pulled up Maya's hospital records next. She had been admitted with a severe infection. Her fever had spiked to 104 degrees. The attending physician had noted that when she was rushed in, Maya was disoriented and needed immediate treatment. But in the police report, there was a note claiming Maya had been lucid and capable of making decisions when she left for the hospital. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Someone had altered the timeline. Ethan didn't just rely on paperwork. He went to the neighborhood where Maya had lived with Kent and Diane. He knocked on doors, he asked questions, and he found gold. An elderly woman who lived next door, Mrs. Alvey, remembered the night of the incident. "I heard those poor babies crying," she said, her voice trembling. "For hours. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't want to intrude. Did you see anyone come or go? Ethan asked. Mrs. Alvey nodded. That woman, the older one, the grandmother. She was outside smoking a cigarette while those babies were screaming inside. I asked her if everything was okay, and she told me to mind my own business. Ethan's jaw tightened. Would you be willing to testify to that? Mrs. Alvey hesitated, then nodded. If it helps that poor mother, yes. Back at his office, Ethan requested the medical examiner's report on the children. When it arrived, his blood ran cold. Cause of death, severe dehydration and hypoxia. Estimated time of death, between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Contributing factors, prolonged confinement without access to food or water. Ethan cross-referenced the timeline. Maya had been admitted to the hospital at 6 p.m. Kent had been at work until 10 p.m., which meant Diane had been alone with the children for at least 4 hours. 4 hours during which they cried, suffered, and died. And she did nothing. 2 days later, Ethan called Maya back to his office. She looked even more exhausted than before. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes now. Hope. I've been digging into your case, Ethan said, laying out documents on his desk. And there are serious problems with the police investigation. Maya leaned forward. What kind of problems? Your mother-in-law lied, Ethan said bluntly. And your husband helped her cover it up. Maya's breath hitched. Ethan continued. I found a neighbour who heard the children crying while Diane was outside smoking. I found discrepancies in Kent's statement, and I found evidence that your hospital records were misrepresented in the police report. Maya's hands trembled. So, what does that mean? It means, Ethan said, his voice steady, that we have a case, a strong one. We're going to prove that you were not responsible for your children's deaths, and we're going to hold the people who are responsible accountable. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Do you really think we can win? Ethan looked her directly in the eye. I don't take cases I don't think I can win, and I'm not going to let them destroy you. That evening, Maya returned to the house she still technically shared with Kent. She had been avoiding him as much as possible, but tonight Kent was waiting for her. He stood in the living room, arms crossed, his face hard. We need to talk, he said. Maya's stomach twisted. About what? About this lawyer you hired? Maya stiffened. How do you know about that? My mother has connections, Kent said coldly. She knows you're trying to drag her through the mud. She killed our children, Maya said, her voice shaking. And you're protecting her? Kent's face flushed. She didn't kill anyone. It was an accident. An accident, Maya's voice rose. She locked them in a room and left them to die. That's not what happened, Kent shouted. Then what happened, Kent? Maya demanded. Tell me the truth. For once in your life, tell me the truth. Kent's jaw clenched. He took a step toward her. You need to drop this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Drop the lawyer. Drop the case. Move on. Move on? Maya's voice cracked. Our children are dead. And dragging my mother through court isn't going to bring them back, Kent yelled. Maya stared at him, her chest heaving. You're choosing her, she whispered. Even now, you're choosing her over me, over them. Kent said nothing. Maya turned to walk away, and that's when Kent grabbed her arm. Let go of me, Maya said, her voice trembling. Kent's grip tightened. You need to listen. Let go. But he didn't. He raised his other hand, and then the voice cut through the room like a blade. Touch her, and I will bury you in court." Maya and Kent both turned. Ethan Reyes stood in the doorway, his expression cold, his eyes locked on Kent. Kent's hand froze mid-air. Ethan stepped into the room, his voice calm but laced with steel. "I'm her attorney, and if you so much as breathe on her the wrong way, I will make sure you lose everything. Your reputation, your career, your freedom." Kent's face went pale. He released Maya's arm and stepped back. Ethan moved to Maya's side, his presence solid and protective. "Pack your things," Ethan said quietly to Maya. "You're not staying here tonight." Maya nodded, her hands shaking. Kent stared at them both, his fists clenched, but he didn't say a word. Maya sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's car, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. She had left the house with nothing but a small duffel bag of clothes and the weight of everything she'd lost. Ethan hadn't said much since they left. He drove with calm focus, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. "There's a women's shelter not far from here. It's safe, clean. They have legal advocates on staff who work with my firm. You'll be protected there." Maya nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Ethan glanced at her. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," Maya said, her throat tight. "You didn't have to help me, but you did." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I told you. I owe you." Maya looked at him, trying to piece together the memory he claimed they shared, but her mind was still blank. "I wish I remembered," she said softly. "You will," Ethan said, "when you're ready." The shelter was a modest two-story building tucked between a community centre and a church. It was quiet, discreet, safe. A woman named Carmen, the intake coordinator, greeted them warmly. She had kind eyes and a calm demeanour that immediately put Maya at ease. "You'll have your own room," Carmen said, leading Maya down a hallway. "Meals are provided, counselling is available if you need it, and no one gets in without clearance." Maya nodded, exhausted. Carmen handed her a key. "You're safe here, I promise." After Carmen left, Maya sat on the edge of the small bed and stared at the walls. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. She pulled out her phone and stared at the lock screen, a photo of Amara and Caleb smiling. Her chest ached, but she didn't cry. She couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. Not until justice was served. Back at his office, Ethan worked late into the night. His desk was covered with case files, photographs, timelines, and legal documents. He had built his career on taking impossible cases, cases where the defendant had no money, no support, no hope. But this one was different. This wasn't just about winning. This was personal. He picked up his phone and called his investigator, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Asha Patel. "Asha, I need you to dig into everything. Neighbours, CCTV footage, phone records, bank statements. I want to know what Kent and Diane were doing, saying, and hiding." "Already on it," Asha said. "I've got something you're going to want to see." "What?" "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. You're not going to believe this." The next morning, Ethan and Asha sat in the living room of Mrs. Alvey, the elderly neighbour who had heard the children crying. Asha had convinced her to go on record with a formal statement. Mrs. Alvey sat across from them, her hands folded in her lap, her expression sombre. "Tell me again what you saw that night," Ethan said gently. Mrs. Alvey took a shaky breath. "I heard the babies crying, screaming really. It went on for hours. I was in my kitchen making dinner, and I kept hearing them through the wall." "What time was this?" Ethan asked. "Around 7:30, maybe 8. I looked out my window and saw that woman, the grandmother, standing on the porch, smoking a cigarette, just standing there, calm as anything." Ethan's pen moved across his notepad. "Did you speak to her?" "I did," Mrs. Alvey said, her voice trembling. "I went outside and asked if everything was okay, if the babies were all right." "And what did she say?" Mrs. Alvey's eyes filled with tears. "She looked at me like I was dirt, and she said, 'Mind your own damn business.'" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I should have called someone," Mrs. Alvey whispered. "I should have—" "This isn't your fault," Ethan said firmly, "but your testimony can help make sure the person responsible is held accountable." Mrs. Alvey nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes." Later that afternoon, Asher pulled up security footage from one of the apartments close to the building where Maya lived. "Check this out," Asher said, pointing at the screen. The footage showed the exterior of the building, time-stamped from the night of the incident. At 5:47 p.m., Maya is seen leaving the building, unconscious but supported by Kent. She looks visibly ill, barely able to walk. At 7:03 p.m., Kent returns alone. He walks inside quickly. At 7:15 p.m., Kent leaves again, heading toward his car. "He left," Ethan said slowly. "He went back to work." "Exactly," Asher said, which means Diane was alone with the children from 6 p.m. until Kent came back at 10:30 p.m. Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. 4 hours. She had them for 3 hours. Asher nodded. "And look at this." She fast-forwarded the footage. At 8:42 p.m., Diane is seen stepping outside the building, lighting a cigarette. She stands there for several minutes, calm and unbothered. At 9:10 p.m., she goes back inside. "She was outside smoking while those babies were dying," Ethan said, his voice hard. Asher nodded grimly. "And she didn't check on them once." Then Asher pulled up another file on her laptop. "And there's more. I got into Kent's phone records." "How?" Ethan asked. Asher smirked. "Let's just say I have friends in low places." She turned the screen toward Ethan. It was a text conversation between Kent and a woman named Simone. "Can't talk right now. Things are tense at home." Simone replied, "Your mom is still giving Maya a hard time. You have no idea. Sometimes I think she actually hates the kids." Simone replies again, "That's messed up. Why don't you say something?" Kent's last message reads, "It's complicated. She's my mum. I can't just turn on her." Ethan's eyes darkened. He knew. "He knew," Asher confirmed, "and he did nothing." While Ethan gathered evidence, Maya found herself thinking about the lawyer who claimed she had saved him. She still couldn't remember. 2 weeks later, the preliminary hearing began. It was held in a small courtroom packed with observers, reporters, and Kent's expensive legal team. Diane sat beside her lawyer, a silver-haired man named Richard Cross. She looked calm, composed, almost smug. Kent sat a few rows behind her, his face pale and tense. Maya sat at the defendant's table beside Ethan. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Ethan leaned over and whispered, "Just breathe. I've got this." Maya nodded. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, called the court to order. Richard Cross stood first. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case, but the evidence is clear. Mrs. Lawson left her children in an unsafe environment, knowing no one was available to care for them. This is a case of negligence, not malice." Ethan stood, his voice calm and cutting. "Your Honor, the defense will show that Mrs. Lawson did no such thing. The evidence will prove that Diane Lawson was present, aware, and criminally negligent, and that Kent Lawson conspired to cover it up." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Richard Cross's face tightened. Ethan called Mrs. Alvey to the stand. She testified clearly, emotionally, about hearing the children cry and seeing Diane outside, indifferent. Ethan played the CCTV footage. The courtroom fell silent as they watched, Diane calmly smoking while the children suffered inside. Then Ethan presented Kent's text messages. By the time he was done, Diane's lawyer was sweating, and Diane's face had gone pale. After the hearing, Kent stormed out of the courtroom and made a phone call. "I need a better lawyer," he said, his voice tight. "Someone who can make this go away." The person on the other end said something. Kent's face hardened. "I don't care what it costs. Do it." That evening, Ethan was in his office reviewing case notes when his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He opened the message. "Withdraw from the case or you lose everything. Your license, your career, your life." Ethan stared at the screen, his jaw tight. Then he typed back a single word. "Try me." Ethan had protected many clients over the years. He had defended the innocent. He had fought for the powerless. He had stood in courtrooms against impossible odds. But this was the first time it felt personal, because this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about protecting someone who had once protected him. The morning after Ethan received the threatening message, he didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, going through every angle, every piece of evidence, every potential weakness in the case. He knew what was coming. When people like Diane Lawson felt cornered, they didn't surrender quietly. They fought dirty, and Ethan had no intention of letting Maya become collateral damage. At 8 a.m., Ethan called Maya to his office. She arrived looking tired but stronger than she had been weeks ago. There was a quiet determination in her eyes now, a resolve that hadn't been there before. Ethan gestured to a chair. "Sit. We need to talk." Maya sat down, her expression wary. "What's wrong?" Ethan didn't sugarcoat it. "I received a threat last night. Someone wants me off this case." Maya's face went pale. "What kind of threat?" "The kind that says, if I don't withdraw, I'll lose my license, my career, and possibly more." Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "I traced the number. It's linked to a burner phone, but the location pings near your old neighborhood." Maya's hands trembled. "Diane?" Ethan nodded. "She's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." "Maybe you should," Maya started, her voice shaking. "No," Ethan said firmly. "I'm not backing down, but I am taking precautions." He slid a business card across the desk. "This is Marcus Reed. He's a private security consultant. He'll be assigned to you until this case is over." Maya stared at the card. "You think I'm in danger?" "I think Diane has already proven what she's capable of," Ethan said quietly. "And I'm not taking any chances." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Okay." Ethan leaned forward. "Maya, listen to me. We're close, so close. The truth is coming out, but the next few days are going to be intense. I need you to stay strong." Maya wiped her eyes and looked at him. "I'm not giving up. Not after everything." Ethan's expression softened. "Good, because neither am I." Later that day, Asha burst into Ethan's office with a laptop under her arm. "You're going to want to see this," she said, barely containing her excitement. Ethan looked up from his notes. "What did you find?" Asha set the laptop on his desk and pulled up a file. "I've been digging into Diane's finances, and guess what? 2 days after the children died, she transferred $15,000 to Richard Cross's law firm." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "She hired him before the investigation even started." "Exactly," Asha said. "She knew she was going to need a lawyer, which means she knew she was guilty." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What else? Asher grinned. Phone records. Diane made 7 calls to Kent the night of the incident. The first one was at 7:18 p.m., right after he left for work. The last one was at 10:22 p.m., 8 minutes before he came home. She was coordinating with him, Ethan said slowly. Yep, and there's more. Asher pulled up another file. Kent called Richard Cross the next morning, before the police even finished their investigation. Ethan's jaw tightened. They planned the cover-up together. Asher nodded. And now we can prove it. The trial began on a cold Monday morning. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back rows. Spectators whispered among themselves. Cameras waited outside. This case has become national news. Mother accused of neglect fights back against in-laws. Lawyer takes on powerful family in child death case. Maya sat at the defense table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She looked small, vulnerable, but her eyes were steady. Ethan sat beside her, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his expression calm and focused. Across the aisle, Diane sat beside Richard Cross, her face a mask of composure. She wore pearls and a tailored blazer, projecting an image of respectability. Kent sat a few rows behind her, his face pale and drawn. The judge, the Honourable Margaret Caldwell, entered the courtroom. She was a no-nonsense woman in her late 60s, known for her fairness and her intolerance for lies. All rise, the bailiff called. Everyone stood. Judge Caldwell took her seat and surveyed the room. Be seated. Let's begin. Richard Cross stood first, his voice smooth and practiced. Your Honour, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a tragedy. A terrible, heartbreaking tragedy. 2 innocent children lost their lives. But tragedy does not equal criminality. Mrs. Diane Lawson is a devoted grandmother, a woman who has spent her life caring for her family. On the night in question, she was asked to watch her grandchildren at the last minute, with no preparation, no support. And when Mrs. Maya Lawson left for the hospital, she did so, knowing her mother-in-law was not equipped to care for 2 young children alone. This case is about negligence, yes, but it is Mrs. Maya Lawson's negligence, not Mrs. Diane Lawson's. He sat down, satisfied. Ethan stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He walked to the centre of the courtroom and looked directly at the jury. Your Honour, members of the jury, Mr. Cross is right about one thing. This is a tragedy, but it is not an accident, and it is not Maya Allen's fault. He paused, letting the words settle. The evidence will show that Diane Lawson was present, aware, and capable. The evidence will show that she locked 2 children in a room and ignored their cries for help. The evidence will show that she lied to the police, manipulated her son, and tried to destroy an innocent woman to save herself. This case is about justice, and by the end of this trial, you will know exactly who is responsible for the deaths of Amara and Caleb Lawson. The courtroom was silent. Ethan sat down. Maya's eyes were wet, but she didn't look away. Ethan called Mrs. Alvey to the stand. She looked nervous, her hands trembling as she was sworn in. Ethan approached gently. Mrs. Alvey, can you tell the court where you live? I live next door to where the Lawson family lived, she said quietly. And were you home on the night of the incident? Yes. Can you describe what you heard? Mrs. Alvey took a shaky breath. I heard children crying, screaming really. It went on for a long time. I thought maybe they were just upset, but it didn't stop. What time was this? Around 8 o'clock, maybe a little later. And did you see anyone? Mrs. Alvey nodded. I looked out my window and saw the grandmother, Mrs. Diane Lawson, standing on the porch, smoking a cigarette. Did she seem concerned? No, Mrs. Alvey said, her voice breaking. She looked calm, like nothing was wrong. Did you speak to her? Yes. I went outside and asked if the children were okay. And what did she say? Mrs. Alvey's eyes filled with tears. She told me to mind my own damn business. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Ethan let the moment sit. No further questions. Richard Cross stood for cross-examination, but Mrs. Alvey's testimony was unshakable. Next, Ethan presented the security footage. The jury watched in silence as the timeline unfolded on the screen. 5:47 p.m. Maya leaves, visibly ill and unconscious, supported by Kent. 7:03 p.m. Kent returns alone. 7:15 p.m. Kent leaves again for work. 8:42 p.m. Diane steps outside, lights a cigarette, and stands calmly. 9:10 p.m. Diane goes back inside. 10:30 p.m. Kent returns home. Ethan paused the video. Ladies and gentlemen, during those 3 hours, Diane Lawson was alone with Amara and Caleb. She was present, she was aware, and she did nothing. On the third day of the trial, Ethan called Kent to the stand. Kent looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot. Ethan didn't waste time. Mr. Lawson, you told the police that your wife left the children without arranging care. Is that correct? Yes, Kent said quietly. But that's not true, is it? Kent hesitated. Mr. Lawson, Ethan said sharply. Your mother agreed to watch the children, didn't she? Kent's jaw clenched. She said she would. So, your wife did not abandon them? No, Kent admitted, his voice barely audible. Then why did you lie? Kent's hands shook. Because my mother told me to. The courtroom erupted. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel. Order! Ethan pressed forward. Why did your mother want you to lie? Kent's face crumbled. She said she locked them in the room to teach Maya a lesson, to show her she couldn't just leave whenever she wanted. Diane shot to her feet. That's a lie! Sit down, Mrs. Lawson, Judge Caldwell barked. Kent was sobbing now. I didn't know they would die. I didn't know. No further questions, Ethan said. By the end of the week, the case was over. Kent was arrested for obstruction of justice and perjury. Diane was charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter and criminal negligence. The judge turned to Maya. Mrs. Allen, do you have anything you'd like to say? Maya stood slowly. For weeks, she'd been silent, broken, powerless. But now, she looked directly at Diane. Yes, Maya said, her voice steady. I want to press full charges. Diane's face went white, and for the first time, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in months. Power. The verdict came on a grey Thursday morning. The courtroom was packed once again. Reporters, observers, supporters who had followed Maya's story from the beginning. Maya sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a simple grey blouse and black pants. Her face was calm, but her heart was racing. Ethan sat beside her, his presence steady and grounding. Across the aisle, Diane Lawson sat stone-faced, flanked by her lawyer. Kent sat a few rows back, his head bowed, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Judge Caldwell entered, and the room fell silent. All rise. Everyone stood. The judge took her seat and looked out over the courtroom with the weight of someone who had seen too many tragedies. Be seated. The room settled. Judge Caldwell opened the file in front of her and began to read. In the matter of the People versus Diane Lawson and Kent Lawson, this court has reviewed all evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis. The facts are clear. On the night in question, Diane Lawson was entrusted with the care of 2 children. She locked them in a room, ignored their distress, and failed to provide basic necessities. Her actions directly contributed to their deaths. Kent Lawson conspired to obstruct justice and commit perjury to protect his mother. Diane's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Judge Caldwell continued. This court finds Diane Lawson guilty of 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter and criminal negligence. Kent Lawson is found guilty of obstruction of justice and perjury. Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom. Maya's breath caught. Furthermore, Judge Caldwell said, her voice firm, this court finds that Maya Allen bears no responsibility for the deaths of her children. She is cleared of all charges and suspicion. All restrictions on her parental rights are hereby lifted. Maya's hands flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You did it, he whispered. Maya couldn't speak. She could only nod, her body shaking with relief. Judge Caldwell turned to Diane. Mrs. Lawson, you will serve 15 years in state prison. Mr. Lawson, you will serve 5 years. Diane's face twisted with rage. This is a travesty. I did nothing wrong. Bailiff, Judge Caldwell said coolly, remove Mrs. Lawson from my courtroom. As Diane was led away in handcuffs, she turned and glared at Maya with pure venom. But Maya didn't flinch. She held Diane's gaze until the woman disappeared through the door. And then, finally, Maya let herself breathe. The moment Maya and Ethan stepped outside, they were swarmed by reporters. Mrs. Allen, how do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Do you have anything to say to Diane Lawson? Ethan stepped in front of Maya, shielding her. No comment. Please respect my client's privacy. But Maya gently touched his arm. It's okay. She turned to face the cameras, her voice steady. I want to say that this was never about revenge. This was about the truth. My children, Amara and Caleb, deserve justice. And today, they got it. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't look away. I also want to say that no mother should ever have to go through what I went through. If you are suffering in silence, if you are being blamed for something you didn't do, please know that you are not alone, and there are people who will fight for you. She glanced at Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly, then turned and walked away. The cameras flashed, but Maya didn't look back. In the weeks following the trial, Maya's life slowly began to take shape again. Ethan helped her navigate the legal aftermath. He worked with immigration attorneys to stabilize her status, ensuring she could remain in the country without fear of deportation. He connected her with a trauma counselor who specialized in grief and loss. He helped her find a small, affordable apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the house where her children had died. And when Maya's newborn daughter, Zara, was finally returned to her by Child Protective Services, Ethan was there. Maya held Zara in her arms, tears streaming down her face as the social worker handed over the custody papers. She's yours, Karen, the social worker, said with a warm smile. Completely and legally yours. Maya looked down at Zara's tiny sleeping face and whispered, I'm never letting you go. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching quietly, his heart full. One crisp Saturday morning, Maya asked Ethan to drive her somewhere. He didn't ask where, he just drove. They arrived at a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The air was cool, the sky overcast. Maya led him down a winding path until they reached 2 small headstones, side by side. Amara Grace Lawson, beloved daughter, 2020 to 2023. Caleb James Lawson, beloved son, 2022 to 2023. Maya knelt in front of the graves, her hand resting gently on the cold stone. Ethan stood a respectful distance away, giving her space. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so So sorry. She closed her eyes, tears falling freely. But I want you to know, I fought for you. I made sure the truth came out. I made sure the people who hurt you will never hurt anyone else. She took a shaky breath. And I promise, I'm going to live, not just survive, but really live. For you, for Zara, for me. She pressed her fingers to her lips and then to each headstone. I love you. Always. She stood slowly, wiping her eyes, and turned to find Ethan, watching her with quiet understanding. Thank you, she said softly, for giving me the chance to say that. You don't have to thank me, Ethan said gently. Maya walked over to him, and for a moment they stood in silence, the weight of everything hanging between them. I don't know how to move forward, Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be whole again. Ethan looked at her, his expression tender. You don't have to be whole right now. You just have to keep going, one day at a time. Maya nodded, her throat tight. And you don't have to do it alone, Ethan added quietly. Maya looked up at him, her heart aching in a way that was both painful and hopeful. A few days later, Maya and Ethan sat in a small cafe near his office. It had become their routine, meeting for coffee, talking about life, about everything and nothing. Maya stirred her tea absently, her mind wandering. Ethan, she said suddenly, you said I saved you once, but I still don't really understand what you meant. Ethan set down his coffee and leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. Then he told her. 7 years ago, he began, I was at my lowest point. I had just come to this country with my younger sister. I was working 3 jobs, barely eating, barely sleeping. I was trying to save enough money to apply to law school, but it felt impossible. Maya listened, her heart tightening. One night, I was sitting outside a grocery store, completely defeated. I thought about giving up, going back home, admitting that I'd failed. He paused, his voice softening. And then you sat down next to me. Maya's breath caught. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything, but you helped me, and you told me that one day I'd be able to help someone else. That $20 paid for my law, school application fee, and that kindness, it gave me hope when I had none. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. I made a promise to myself that night, Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion, that if I ever got the chance to repay you, I would. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again, but I never forgot your face. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. And then you walked into my office, Ethan said, his eyes shining. And I knew this was my chance. Maya's tears spilled over. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for believing me, for everything. Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. I'm just glad I could be here. Weeks turned into months. Maya slowly began to rebuild her life. She enrolled in online classes to finish her nursing degree. She spent her days caring for Zara, watching her grow, and finding joy in the small moments. She went to therapy. She grieved. She healed. And through it all, Ethan was there. Not as her lawyer, not as someone who owed her, but as a friend. And then, slowly, something more. One evening, Maya invited Ethan over for dinner at her apartment. It was simple. Pasta, salad, bread. Nothing fancy. But it felt like home. After dinner, they sat on the small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Zara slept peacefully inside. I never thought I'd feel normal again, Maya said softly. Ethan looked at her. Do you? Maya smiled, a real smile. I'm getting there. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ethan spoke, his voice careful. Maya, I need to tell you something. Maya turned to him, her heart skipping. I've spent months helping you rebuild your life, Ethan said, and I've loved every moment of it. But I need you to know. I'm not doing this because I owe you. I'm doing this because I care about you. Maya's breath caught. Ethan's eyes were steady, vulnerable. I don't want to save you, Maya. I want to stand beside you. If you'll let me. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of hope. She reached out and took his hand. I'd like that, she whispered. Ethan smiled, a soft, genuine smile, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace! Maya Allen had survived the unthinkable. She had lost everything. And then, piece by piece, she had rebuilt herself. Justice had been served. The truth had been told. But more than that, she had found something she never expected. A future, a new beginning, and someone who would walk beside her every step of the way. Because some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with hope, and hope is enough. Thanks for spending time with me today. If you enjoyed Maya's story or learnt a thing or two from it, hit the like button, subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always first to hear the next story. Your comments and support help this channel grow. Tell me what you want to hear next. Until the next story, stay happy.